Hello, and welcome to TerraNash. I'm Aiden, your narrator for tonight. Let's take this time together to step away from the rush of the day and ease into a world of dreams and wonder. Tonight, I'll tell you a story. The Capybara and the Golden Pebble. It's a gentle tale about curiosity, friendship, and the quiet treasures we find when we simply take the time to walk the path before us. In a quiet forest, a kind-hearted capybara named Tavi discovers a golden pebble beneath the ferns, and with it begins a journey that will bring him far more than he ever expected. But before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what time is it as you settle in to hear this story? We'd also love to know what kinds of stories you'd enjoy next. Your thoughts and suggestions inspire us, so please share them in the comments below. If you'd like even more from us, you can check out our Patreon, where you'll gain early access to all our stories, as well as a curated Spotify playlist to help you rest. And if these bedtime stories have been a gentle pause in your nights, subscribing is the simplest way to support us. It means the world to us, and it helps us keep this space soft and sacred for dreamers like you. Now, wherever you are, perhaps tucked into bed, maybe with a soft blanket wrapped around your shoulders, let your breath slow. Let the weight of the day melt gently from your thoughts. Allow the hush of night to cradle you. The trees are still, the stars are watching, and the forest waits quietly. Close your eyes and let the story begin. The morning sun filtered softly through the forest canopy, dappling the mossy earth in gold and green. Birds called lazily from high branches, and a warm breeze rustled through the leaves like a whisper. In the heart of this quiet forest, near a slow-moving stream lined with smooth stones and drifting petals, lived a capybara named Tavi. Tavi was a creature of calm rhythms and simple pleasures. He enjoyed the feeling of mud between his toes, the hum of crickets in the grass, and the hush of the wind as it wound through tall reeds. He was content to spend his days wandering the familiar paths near his riverbank, stopping often to snack on wild fruit or nap in the shade. But this morning, something different caught his eye. As Tavi moved gently through a patch of dew-drenched ferns, his paw brushed against something smooth and cool. He nudged the leaves aside, and there it was, small, round, and glowing faintly in the morning light. A pebble, but not just any pebble. It shimmered with a soft golden hue, unlike anything he had ever seen. Not painted, not metal. It looked as though the sun had kissed it, and then left it behind as a secret. Tavi blinked slowly. He nudged it again with his nose, then picked it up and rolled it in his paw. "What are you?" he murmured, as if the pebble might answer. There was no sound but the rustling of the trees, the trickle of water, and the gentle hush of the wind. But something inside Tavi stirred, a quiet feeling that maybe, just maybe, this little golden pebble was something special. He looked around. The forest, so familiar only moments ago, now seemed to hold secrets. Trails he'd passed 100 times looked different, touched by wonder. He tucked the golden pebble gently into the fold of his satchel and sat by the stream for a moment, his paws in the water. Should he follow it? Where would it lead? Maybe it was magic. Maybe it would bring good fortune. Or maybe it was meant to show him something. With the kind of thoughtful stillness only a capybara could muster, Tavi stood, adjusted his satchel, and took his first few steps beyond the edge of the stream into the deeper parts of the forest he had never explored. The golden pebble rested quietly beside a few soft berries and a folded leaf. Its glow was faint, but steady. And so began the journey, not just through the woods, but through something far richer. A journey that would bring laughter, riddles, fireflies, and quiet truths. But for now, the forest simply waited, green and glowing, as the capybara walked slowly into the unknown. The forest grew denser as Tavi wandered deeper, but it wasn't unkind. Shafts of light broke through the trees, guiding his path like gentle beacons, and the air smelled of damp earth and blooming things. His steps were slow, deliberate. He was in no rush. The golden pebble rested snugly in his satchel, warm against his side, as if it were listening. After a while, he reached a grove filled with flowering vines that draped lazily from the trees, swaying with the breeze. Here, the world felt suspended, quiet and blooming and still. Tavi paused, taking it all in, when a sudden blur of color zipped past his ear with a soft hum. Startled but curious, he turned and saw her, a tiny hummingbird, iridescent in the sunlight, hovering mid-air with eyes full of mischief and wisdom. She flitted from blossom to blossom, watching him with interest. "That's a strange thing for a capybara to carry," she chirped, nodding toward his satchel. Tavi smiled softly. "I found it this morning, a golden pebble, just lying beneath the ferns. I think it might be important." The hummingbird's wings beat like whispers. Important? Or just shiny? She hovered closer, her voice light but kind. "I once followed something shiny too. A glint of gold through the trees. I flew for days, chasing it from leaf to leaf. Thought it would lead me to something wondrous. But I forgot to rest. forgot to listen, and in the end, I found myself alone, tired, lost, and far from home. Tavi tilted his head. Do you regret it? The hummingbird paused, then perched on a swaying vine. Not regret, but I learned. Shiny things can make us move fast, faster than our hearts can keep up. Just make sure you're not chasing an echo. Tavi nodded thoughtfully. Her words didn't dim his curiosity, but they settled in like smooth stones at the bottom of a stream. Quiet, grounding. She darted over to a nearby flower, plucked a few petals, and wrapped them around a cluster of tiny forest berries, tucking them into a leaf. Here, for the road, sweet and full of warmth. He accepted the gift with a grateful bow of his head. Thank you. I'll go slowly. I'll listen. She smiled, wings shimmering like a prism. Then you'll find more than gold. With that, she vanished into the trees, a trail of color behind her, leaving only the soft hum of her wings lingering in the air. Tavi sat beneath the vines for a moment longer, savoring a berry. It tasted like sunlight and rain. He placed the rest beside the pebble and stood once more. The path ahead twisted into shadow and light, and he followed it not with haste, but with wonder. The forest opened into a clearing where the trees bowed away from the sunlight, letting golden light spill freely onto the soft grass. Tavi padded into the warm space, the breeze carrying the scent of pine and wild mint. He paused to rest beneath a broad-leafed tree, his satchel rustling gently as he sat. A rustle in the underbrush caught his attention. From the edge of the clearing stepped a slender, rust-colored fox with eyes like amber. His movements were smooth, almost silent, and he watched Tavi with curious calm rather than caution. You're far from the river, the fox said, his voice like dry leaves brushing stone. Tavi nodded. I found something this morning, a golden pebble. I think I'm meant to follow it. The fox tilted his head thoughtfully. A golden pebble? Ah, I once found one too, years ago. Thought it would lead to something grand. Riches, secrets, answers. So I mapped the forest, every trail I walked, every bend I turned. But somewhere along the way, I stopped walking and just kept drawing. From under his cloak, the fox pulled out a folded piece of bark, brittle with age, but carefully preserved. On it was a hand-drawn map, filled with swirling paths, symbols, and gentle brushstrokes. He laid it at Tavi's paws. This was my journey, the fox said, but I never reached the end. Maybe it's meant for you now. Tavi looked at the map, its lines curling like vines. It wasn't just directions. It was art, every hill and hollow drawn with care, as if the fox had fallen in love with each turn. "Why did you stop?" Tavi asked gently. The fox smiled, not sadly, but with a kind of peace. "I thought the pebble was the goal, but it was the walking that mattered. By the time I realized that, my paws were tired and the forest had grown quiet around me. Still, I have no regrets. I met good creatures, made good stories." He leaned back against the tree, sighing into the earth. Tavi rolled the map gently, tucking it into his satchel beside the golden pebble and the wrapped berries. "Then I'll walk it for both of us." The fox's eyes sparkled. "Good, but walk slow, talk to the trees, and if you meet a riddle, don't rush the answer." They shared a moment of stillness, the sun warming their fur, the forest hushed around them. Then the fox stood, gave a gentle nod, and turned back into the woods, his steps leaving barely a trace. Tavi looked down the path ahead, now marked not just by mystery, but by memory. With the map as a guide and the fox's quiet wisdom in his heart, he rose once more and stepped gently forward, toward whatever the forest chose to share next. The sky had begun to change. The golden light of afternoon softened to silver, and above the treetops, clouds gathered like thoughtful whispers. Tavi walked slowly beneath the rustling canopy, following the curving paths on the fox's map. Each turn seemed familiar and new all at once, as though the forest itself were gently rearranging to guide him forward. The first drops of rain came quietly, soft, cool taps on the leaves above. Tavi looked up, blinking as the sky began to weep gently over the forest. He didn't mind the rain. It felt clean, honest. But the wind was growing stronger now, and the trees swayed in deep conversation. Just ahead, nestled between the roots of a willow that leaned like an old storyteller, was a shallow hollow lined with moss and dry leaves. Tavi padded toward it and settled inside, curling his paws beneath him as the rain began to fall in earnest. It was then he noticed he wasn't alone. Across from him, seated comfortably in the hollow's far curve, was a very old tortoise. Her shell was thick and dark, patterned with lines like ancient roads. Her eyes, deep and slow-moving, blinked once as she looked at him. "You've come far," she said, her voice rich and low, like a lullaby beneath the thunder. "I'm following something," Tavi replied, shifting the satchel beside him. "A golden pebble." The tortoise gave a knowing hum and nodded once, very slowly. Many have followed golden things. Few remember to ask why. Tavi tilted his head. "Do you know where it leads?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she looked at him and asked, "What glows without light, weighs nothing yet lingers long, and travels farther than any feet can walk. Tavi blinked. Is it a dream? Is it? She said, not unkindly. Or is it something even quieter? He thought for a moment, then smiled. A memory. The tortoise's eyes softened. A good answer. There is no one right one, but that one will serve you well. She pulled something from beneath her shell, a smooth, flat stone etched with tiny spirals. She handed it to Tavi. For your path, not a map, not a clue, just something to feel beneath your paw when you're unsure. Tavi accepted the gift with a bow of his head, tucking it gently into his satchel beside the pebble, the berries, and the fox's map. The rain softened, tapering off like a fading melody. The storm had come and gone with barely a fuss, like a thought passing through. When he looked back up, the tortoise was already turning to leave, her pace slow but steady. He watched her disappear into the mist, her shell blending with the stones and moss, as though she were part of the forest itself. Tavi stepped out into the damp world, the scent of rain fresh and clean. His paws touched the softened path with purpose, the riddle still echoing in his heart. The Golden Pebble hadn't spoken, but somehow, through each creature he met, it seemed to be telling him something just the same. Evening had settled gently across the forest, turning the leaves a deeper shade of green and filling the air with the scent of wet bark and blooming night flowers. Tavi continued on, guided now by the map's curling path and the quiet rhythm of his own steps. His satchel felt a little heavier, not from weight, but from meaning. The golden pebble resting beside the berries, the spiral stone, and the folded map. Each item, a piece of a story still unfolding. As twilight deepened, he reached the edge of a ravine, a wide, shadowy gap between two wooded ridges. It wasn't steep, but it was long and deep enough that crossing it would be difficult. Tavi scanned the edge, ears twitching. Then he saw it. A bridge. It was made of old planks strung together with vines and supported by tall poles on either side, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. But it wasn't the bridge alone that took his breath. It was the light. Hundreds of fireflies hovered in the air around it, blinking softly in slow, glowing pulses. They clung to the ropes and drifted lazily across the gap, lighting the path in a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. As Tavi stepped closer, a voice called from the shadows. "Are you crossing too?" A small opossum peeked out from behind a rock, eyes wide and cautious. His fur was damp from the rain, and his tail curled tightly around a branch for balance. "I was waiting for someone," the opossum said. "Didn't want to cross alone." Tavi offered a kind smile. "Let's cross together then." Side by side, they approached the bridge. The wood creaked beneath their steps. The vines swayed slightly, but the fireflies stayed close, lighting the way like tiny lanterns. The opossum trembled a little as they reached the midpoint. "I don't like heights," he admitted, gripping the rope with tiny paws. Tavi paused. "It's okay. We can go slowly." The opossum nodded. He took a deep breath, but just as he stepped forward, one of the boards shifted suddenly beneath him. He slipped with a startled yelp, his hind legs dangling over the edge. Without hesitation, Tavi leaned down and caught him, strong and steady. He pulled the little opossum back onto the bridge and held him close for a moment until the trembling stopped. "Thank you," the opossum whispered, his voice tight with relief. Tavi simply nodded. "I'm Tavi." "I'm Pip," the opossum said, his eyes still wide. "And I think I'd like to walk with you a little longer, if that's all right." "I'd like that too," said Tavi, smiling. They finished the crossing slowly, one careful step at a time. When they reached the other side, the fireflies gently drifted apart, returning to the trees and bushes like the stars returning to the sky. Pip took a deep breath and looked back at the bridge, then at Tavi. "Maybe the pebble led you here so we could find each other," he said quietly. Tavi didn't answer at first. He just looked at his new friend and felt something warm settle in his chest. Not the glow of gold, but the quiet light of connection. And with that, they walked into the night together, two sets of paw prints side by side, fireflies blinking softly behind them like echoes of courage. The forest deepened into a hush of shadow and silence, the kind that only arrives when night has fully taken its place. Tavi and Pip walked slowly, side by side, their conversation gentle and spaced between stretches of peaceful quiet. The golden pebble rested quietly in Tavi's satchel, but he hadn't touched it in some time. Somehow, with Pip beside him, it didn't feel quite so urgent anymore. They followed a narrow path flanked by tall pines, and soon the trail opened into a grove where moonlight spilled down like silver thread. At the center stood a tree so wide it looked as though it had stood for centuries, a great hollow oak, its trunk split open like an ancient door. Tavi slowed. "This must be it," he whispered. The tree seemed to breathe with age. Inside, the walls were covered with carvings, circles and lines, hearts and paw prints, initials within spirals. Beneath these marks lay dozens of pebbles, smooth and ordinary, except for their arrangement. They formed little clusters, some shaped like suns, others like leaves, stars, even animals. All had been placed with care. Pip wandered in behind him. "What is this place?" Tavi moved toward the far wall, where a faded mural curved gently around the bark. It showed a creature, not a capybara, not a fox, something soft and round and unknown, carrying a golden pebble in its paw. Around it were other animals, walking beside it, smiling, resting, laughing. And beside the mural, carved into the tree in neat, looping letters, were the words, "A treasure grows greater with each one it gathers." Tavi touched the carving. The golden pebble in his satchel felt suddenly warmer, as if it had been waiting to hear those words again. "I don't think the pebble is a prize," he said softly. "It's a path, a reason to begin, something to carry while we find what truly matters." Pip knelt near one of the pebble circles, tracing the shapes. "Everyone who came before us left something, even if it wasn't gold." Tavi reached into his satchel and gently set the golden pebble in the center of the room. For a moment, the carvings on the wall seemed to shimmer, reflecting the moonlight as if nodding in approval. But he didn't leave it there. Instead, he sat beside it, pulled out the spiral stone the tortoise had given him, and placed it next to the pebble. Then the berries from Leora, wrapped in flower petals, still sweet, still fragrant. And finally, the fox's map, gently unfolded and laid beneath them all. Each item was a memory, a voice, a kindness. Pip, watching quietly, reached into his own little pouch and pulled out a small wooden bead. "I made this from a fallen branch by the stream," he said. "It reminded me of home." He placed it beside the others. They sat there in silence, the hollow tree holding their offerings like a cradle. The wind outside sighed through the leaves, not cold, not mournful, just present. Tavi looked at Pip. "I think we found something." Pip smiled, his eyes soft with sleepiness. "I think we're still finding it." And so, under the watch of the ancient oak and the moonlit sky, they rested, not because the journey was over, but because sometimes the heart needs stillness to understand what it's been carrying all along. By morning, the sky was a pale grey veil, the air still and thick with a hush that often came before storms. Tavi and Pip rose slowly, stretching their limbs and brushing soft leaves from their fur. The hollow tree behind them stood silent and strong, like a guardian seeing them off. They continued their journey through a part of the forest where the trees grew tall and close, their branches weaving a ceiling of green above. Birds called distantly, but even their songs felt quieter than usual. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Pip looked up nervously. "It's coming," he said. "A real one." Tavi nodded. The air had changed, cool and pressing. They picked up their pace, but the rain began to quicken too, turning from a soft drizzle to a steady downpour. Wind threaded through the trees in moaning gusts, and the path beneath their paws grew slick, just as the wind howled louder and the sky let loose a rumble of thunder. Tavi spotted a low, wide shape ahead. A cave nestled at the base of a moss-covered hill. Without a word, he and Pip dashed toward it, slipping inside just as the storm crashed through the forest in earnest. Inside, the air was warm and dry. The cave smelled faintly of herbs and earth. But what surprised Tavi most were the familiar faces. Leora, the hummingbird, perched on a thin root dangling from the ceiling, her wings folded and still. Renzo the fox sat curled near the wall, his tail tucked beneath him, eyes blinking in quiet recognition. And nestled in a corner like a carved statue was Mora, the old tortoise, her shell patterned with raindrop shadows. They had all found shelter here. Tavi and Pip stood at the entrance, soaked but safe. Renzo gave a quiet chuckle. Seems the pebble has a way of bringing old paths back together. Leora fluttered over, inspecting Pip with curious eyes. "You've made a friend," she said to Tavi. "I've made a few," Tavi replied, smiling. They all gathered near the center of the cave, where someone had left a circle of flat stones and bits of dry wood. Renzo sparked a small fire with practiced paws, and soon a gentle flame danced in the dim light, casting golden flickers across the walls. They shared what they had: dried herbs, fruit, a few sweet nuts. Leora told stories of flying just ahead of the storm, of seeing rivers from above and chasing light through leaves. Mora offered no tales, but listened with the contentment of someone who had heard many. Pip curled up beside Tavi, his eyes already fluttering. The storm outside roared, but in the cave, everything was calm. The pebble lay between them all, not shining, not glowing, but still somehow central, like the soft beat of a drum you could feel, but not hear. Tavi gazed around the circle. This wasn't what he'd imagined when he first found the pebble. No golden reward, no grand revelation, but this gentle gathering, this warmth, this stillness surrounded by storm, felt more valuable than anything he could have dreamed. He placed a paw over the pebble and whispered, "Thank you." And as the wind cried through the trees and rain kissed the earth, 5 travelers sat in quiet company, wrapped in shared stories and the slow kind of joy that only comes from being understood. The storm passed sometime in the early morning. The cave was still and cool, filled with the soft breaths of sleeping creatures and the faint crackle of embers. Outside, the forest shimmered with dew, each leaf a jewel, each branch dripping with silver light. Tavi was the first to rise. He moved slowly, careful not to wake Pip, who was curled beneath a mossy ledge, nor the others, who slept in gentle heaps nearby. He stepped outside into the misty dawn, his paws sinking into the damp earth. The world felt hushed, as if it too were waking from a long, thoughtful dream. He reached into his satchel and gently pulled out the golden pebble. It no longer shimmered the way it had when he first found it. Its glow was fainter now, more like a memory than a light. He turned it over in his paw and smiled softly. It had taken him far, not across great distances, but through quiet places inside himself. And it had brought him here, not to a treasure, but to companions, to warmth, to meaning. He walked until he found the same grove where it had all begun, the patch of ferns where the forest light had once pointed him towards something unknown. He knelt. The ferns had grown slightly, now dotted with fresh shoots and tiny blooms from the recent rain. Tavi cleared a soft space in the earth and placed the golden pebble there, just beneath the leaves, not hidden, but waiting for another. He reached into his satchel once more and took out the spiral stone Mora had given him. He placed it beside the pebble. Then the last few berries from Leora, now slightly wrinkled, but still sweet with memory. From his side, Pip appeared, still blinking sleep from his eyes. In his paws, he held a tiny carved bead, the one he'd left by the hollow tree. "I want to add it here too," Pip whispered. Together, they created a small circle around the golden pebble, not as an altar, not as an ending, just a quiet resting place for something that had begun as a mystery and had become a thread connecting so many hearts. Renzo, Leora, and Mora appeared quietly behind them, each watching with soft expressions. The forest, bathed in morning light, seemed to hold its breath. Tavi turned and looked at them all. "I think it was never meant to be kept." Leora nodded. "But always meant to be found." One by one, they added their own small tokens: feathers, twigs, stones, a pressed flower. Not because they had to, but because something about that pebble had helped each of them see more clearly. When they finished, the forest felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just more alive, as though it had accepted the offering with quiet gratitude. The pebble would stay there now, beneath the ferns, its story carried not in gold, but in hearts that walked slower, listened deeper, and saw more clearly than before. And just beyond the clearing, the path home waited gently beneath the trees. The forest no longer felt vast or mysterious to Tavi. It felt familiar, like the inside of a memory he'd lived through with his eyes open. With Pip beside him, and the warmth of shared stories tucked into the quiet between their steps, they began the journey home. The trees arched overhead like guardians, their leaves whispering softly in the breeze. The path beneath their paws was damp but welcoming, and the air held the sweet scent of moss and new blossoms. Though they had walked far, Their pace was unhurried, each step wrapped in calm awareness. Occasionally they paused, once to listen to the gentle drumming of a woodpecker in the distance, another time to let a procession of ants cross the trail undisturbed. Every small moment held meaning now. Every breath of wind, every flicker of sunlight on bark felt like part of a larger song. They passed the bridge of fireflies again, now empty in the daylight, but still shimmering faintly in their memory. Pip looked up at it with a smile. "It's quieter without the lights," he said, "but I still see them." Tavi nodded. "Me too." Further along, they passed the grove of vines where Leora had first gifted him the berries. The flowers had opened wider since then, their petals reaching toward the sun. Tavi paused, touched one gently, and felt a flicker of gratitude rise in his chest. By the time they reached the riverbank, the sun was drifting toward the edge of the sky, turning the water into slow ribbons of gold and rose. Tavi's burrow sat quietly where he'd left it, its entrance soft with moss and shaded by familiar reeds. He stood for a moment, just looking at it. It hadn't changed, but he had. Pip looked up at him. "Will you still wander?" Tavi smiled. "Maybe, but I think I'll rest a while first." Pip stretched and curled up on the soft grass. "I'll stay too, if that's all right." Tavi nodded and settled beside him, the ground beneath them warm from the day. The river flowed on, slow and steady, a soft lullaby in the hush of evening. They didn't speak much after that. Words weren't needed. The journey had spoken enough. And as the sky deepened into dusk and the stars prepared to stretch across the heavens, Tavi closed his eyes, not searching, not seeking, just resting in the quiet glow of enough. Night settled gently over the forest, wrapping everything in a soft hush. Crickets began their slow, rhythmic songs, and the river beside Tavi's burrow whispered its steady lullaby. The stars appeared one by one, scattered like little lanterns across the sky, each flickering softly as if they too were breathing. Inside the cozy hollow of his home, Tavi lay on a bed of woven grass and dried leaves. Pip curled up close beside him, his tail wrapped like a ribbon around them both. The air was cool but gentle, and the scent of river mist and wild flowers drifted lazily through the doorway. Tavi's eyes were half closed, his thoughts floating like driftwood on still water. He thought of the Golden Pebble, now resting quietly beneath the ferns, far away, but still close in his heart. He thought of Leora and her fluttering wings, of Renzo's map, of Mora's riddle that still echoed softly in the back of his mind, and of Pip, his quiet courage, his steady steps beside him. He didn't need to hold the pebble anymore to feel its presence. It had done what it came to do, not by granting wishes or revealing secrets, but by opening his eyes to the treasures already within his reach. The laughter of new friends, the peace of an evening breeze, the hush of a story shared by firelight, the stillness of simply being. He breathed deeply, letting the quiet fill him. There was no rush, no race to finish, no final lesson waiting in the dark. Just this moment, this warm, perfect now. Outside, the forest rested, and inside, Tavi finally let go of the last bit of wondering, not because the journey was forgotten, but because it had become part of him, like a stone at the bottom of a clear stream, shaped gently by time and water, resting exactly where it belonged. He let his eyes drift shut, the soft murmur of the river echoing through his dreams. And in the dark, where only the stars kept watch, Tavi smiled. Not because he'd found something to keep, but because he'd discovered what it means to let go, to walk with open paws, and to know deep down that the quiet glow of enough was already his.